Welcome, sports fans, to this special mock draft edition of the Steel Scorpion Sports Podcast. In this podcast, we're going to be doing a live mock draft for the NFL draft upcoming here in about a week and a half. And Mark will alternate picks. And luckily, before we went on the air tonight, we flipped a coin, and I won. So I get to select first and then every odd pick. You obviously will get to select second and every even pick. Seem okay?
Yeah, I'm ready.
All right, and there are a couple rules for this, obviously. We will be drafting as if we're the GM of this team, and we will have 2 minute selection. I'm joking. We will go much faster than that in most cases. And I believe, Mark, because it's too complicated, we'll probably avoid trades. Just seems a little messy that way, even though we both know there will be trades during the NFL draft that truly occurs next Thursday.
There will be trades. I think the official over under, you can actually bet on this. I think it's all is 5.5, so there will be trades. And in a few spots, we might mention where this might be a spot where you see a trade. But as far as this mock draft, we'll pretend they don't happen.
All right. With that, then, shall I put myself on the clock?
Yes, you're on the clock.
All right. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers have the first pick, as we all know, and with that pick, I believe Jameis Winston, quarterback, Florida State, is my selection. Clearly, the Bucs need QB more than anything else. You can't win in the NFL without a QB. They don't believe Mike Glennon's the future. They got rid of McCown. I believe Winston's a little more pro-ready than Mariota, so that's what they're going with. And as a benefit, if any of these legal troubles off the field continue, he is in the state of Florida, so they could get a work release program for the home games. So I think that works well. With that, Mark, I will pass it over to the first wild card pick, I think, that's coming up, and that's the Tennessee Titans, who could go a plethora of different directions.
I will say that Vegas agrees with you on that first pick because you can bet that Winston will be the first pick, but the price is the negative 400. So you got to pay $4 for every one that you want to win. So I think we'll be seeing Winston at number 1. Number 2 for the Titans, I'm tempted here to take Todd Gurley just because I think he would melt into a puddle if I did. But I do think this is a spot where we'll probably see a trade. I think where there's smoke, there's fire. I'm starting to see, a lot of rumors about Philip Rivers saying that he doesn't want to play for the Los Angeles Chargers. And his former offensive coordinator is now the coach in Tennessee. So I think there might be something brewing there. They're going to wait and make sure that Mariota is not picked first by the Buccaneers. And so when you see the Titans go on the clock in the real draft, they might be calling up the Chargers and finalizing the deal of that trade. But for now, I will say the Titans need a QB. Jay Clocker, all 26 years old, retired in the offseason. All they have right now is Zach Mettenberger, who was, I think, around a 6th-round pick last year. He looked okay. Nothing great, though. So they need a QB. So here at number 2, I'm going to say Marcus Mariota, QB, Oregon.
Good selection. I think that is the pick that will be at second. Whether it's the Titans or not, I don't know. And I will say from the San Diego perspective, they had the NFL out here last week because of the stadium issues, and they basically said, if you don't have commitment and shovels in the ground by this year, we're probably going to let the Chargers move. And that can't happen in California, so bye-bye Chargers. That brings us to the third pick, the Jacksonville Jaguars. They need a lot of help. They think they have their quarterback. Wide receiver could be a place they look to. They do have some good young receivers, but never hurts to add another one. They could use maybe some offensive line help, but I think they're going to go defense with this pick. They have their choice of all the defensive players, obviously, if QBs are the only ones off the board. I think they're really going to look at hard. Do you go with the defensive tackle where they're actually pretty solid, or do you go with the rusher, the edge rusher? And I think they're going to go edge rusher. And so if I'm the GM, which I am, I'm going with Dante Fowler, defensive end / outside linebacker from Florida, which again, it's another in-state pick, so I don't believe Fowler has had any problems, but it's good to have those in-state kids, and you basically probably get more information on them than any other franchises since Gainesville's just down the road from you. So that was the third pick, Mark. Why don't you take us to pick number 4?
Fowler had his official visit with the Jaguars and said that they're going to pick him, so I guess you believe him there, so we'll see if that happens. The Raiders at number 4 now have quite the dilemma because Leonard Williams is widely considered to be the best defensive player in this draft, but they also need a wide receiver. And if I'm Reggie McKenzie, and I got Derek Carr last year, he had a decent rookie season. I think his stats actually looked a little bit better than what he actually played on the field. But if you're Reggie McKenzie, you need Derek Carr to be your guy. You've already been there a few years. You haven't really done much yet. You need to get things turned around. You need to give Derek Carr a chance to succeed. You don't have a lot of wide receiver right now. Signed Michael Crabtree last week, but that's really not much of anything at this point. So I think they'll be tempted to take Leonard Williams, but I think they got to go wide receiver. At that point, they have to choose between Kevin White and Amari Cooper. Kevin White probably has a little bit higher upside, but Amari Cooper is super safe. High floor, high ceiling. So I'm going to say the Raiders at number 4 take Amari Cooper, wide receiver out of Alabama.
Interesting. And I actually think that would be the wrong pick, only because I think it's a really deep wide receiver draft. And surprisingly, the Raiders are picking high in every round. They pick early in the second round. Could get a good receiver there. But you can't get the best defensive player in many people's eyes until this pick. But you chose Amari Cooper, which brings the Washington Redskins onto the clock. Now, Washington offensive line is probably the biggest weakness, but there's no one there that you really feel like, hey, I'm going to go grab. They've got RG3, so apparently they have to try and make it work with him. Wide receiver could be an option here because, like you said, when you have a young quarterback, surrounding him with weapons is good. They have Garcon and they have a few other wide receivers, but I think Garcon's in his last year of his contract, and Deshaun Jackson might be as well. So maybe they go Kevin White, but I think at this point they
All right, it's good for the Redskins there. That brings us to the Jets, number 6. The Jets probably need a QB. Right now they have Geno Smith and Ryan Fitzpatrick, neither of which is probably the long-term answer. But with Winston and Mariota off the board, and certainly not a third QB that's worthy of the number 6 pick, they probably look to address their defense. They would have liked to have Leonard Williams, but he just went off the board. They're going to look for someone that can rush the passer. They could look at a few guys. They could look at Randy Gregory. They could look at Nick Beasley. They could look at Shane Ray out of Missouri. I'm the GM for this pick. I'm going to give them Vic Beasley, outside linebacker out of Clemson.
Yeah, I actually think that's exactly where they would go at that situation if the 5 ahead of them went. So, good pick. That leads us to the Chicago Bears at number 7. Now, the Bears have a new head coach in John Fox. I don't know if you've ever followed John Fox's drafts before, but when he's the head coach, they don't ever draft anything in the first round but defense. I know a lot of people are saying, well, they opened up this big hole on offense by getting rid of Brandon Marshall, so they need another wide receiver. They could get Kevin White here or Amari Cooper if he fell or whatever. I don't think John Fox will go there. He's going to talk to the GM. He's going to say, listen, we'll get a wide receiver in the second round. I need a defense. And their defense was really bad. So I think at this point, they look through, as you mentioned, some of those rushers. Randy Gregory, they're not taking because of the issues. Shane Ray is an option. Another option would be a nose tackle, but as you start to hear some of the rumblings around nose tackles, they don't value Shelton out of Washington highly enough to pull him up to 7. So I think Shane Ray from Missouri, an outside linebacker, defensive end, will be the selection.
All right. Well, the Falcons are up next at number 8, and they're pretty disappointed at this point because the last 3 picks have been Williams, Beasley, and Ray, especially those last 2 guys. They need someone who can rush the passer. Last year, I think they were in the bottom 5 in the league as far as sacks, and maybe the worst. Their leading sacker had 4.5 sacks, and the next guy on the team had 2.5. So they barely got to the quarterback at all last year. They would have liked to see Beasley and Ray been there. But as it is, they're off the board. I don't think that Eric Armstead of Oregon will go this high at number 8. I think at this point the Falcons are going to be looking between Randy Gregory and Bud Dupree out of Kentucky. And at this point, he may spend a little bit more in the draft due to the marijuana situation he had at the combine. But I'm going to go ahead and give the Falcons Randy Gregory, outside linebacker out of Nebraska.
I have to say, Randy Gregory will be highly disappointed that the Broncos or Seahawks didn't trade up for him.
True.
All right. Well, no, I agree. I think that's a good pick. They need an edge rusher, so that's the best one left. That brings us to the New York Giants. And an easy selection in my mind because the Giants are a team that follow a blueprint. They follow build from defensive line or offensive line, whatever is sort of weaker. And those have been the formulaic strategies they've used that got them a couple Super Bowls. Protect Eli so he can throw it on the field and get at the other quarterback, like a Tom Brady. In this case, we just had a big run on defensive players. Not a lot left that I think they're going to be salivating over. We haven't had one offensive lineman come off the board, though, until now. With the 9th pick, I think Brandon Scherf, offensive tackle, Iowa, will be the Giants selection.
And he is a giant of a man and going to the Giants. And we've now had back-to-back picks from the Big Ten, which is the first time they've had a player selected in the top 10 for, I think, 6 or 7 years. So good job to the Big Ten on this. Up next is the Rams at number 10. They could go a few different directions here. Their defense actually is pretty good. They've addressed it recently. They got some good picks last year on the defense. They could go offensive line, but their offense fairly weak. They got their running back now. They got Trey Mason in the draft last year, I think, in the 3rd round, but they need some receivers. They're still pretty weak at receiver. Brian Quick, he's okay. Tavon Austin, he hasn't really panned out given how high he went in the draft. I think they need to get a legit weapon to Nick Foles, see if he can be their, potential QB of the future. At this point, we've seen a lot of mock drafts where we have a few wide receivers going in the top 10, but in this case, you passed. The Bears did not take a wide receiver, which in a lot of recent mocks they have, with Kevin White sitting there at number 10, a guy that many people think has the highest upside of any wide receiver in this draft. The St. Louis Rams are going to grab Kevin White, wide receiver out of West Virginia.
Well, their last wide receiver from West Virginia worked out, so maybe this one will as well. Oh, wait, Tavon Austin.
Yeah, that's true.
All right, well, that was our top 10. A quick recap. We had Winston, Mariota, Fowler, Cooper, Williams, Beasley, Ray, Gregory, Scherf, and White. Which brings us to number 11, the Minnehaha Vikings. Minnesota probably would have taken White had he been sitting there. They need a wide receiver, that's for sure. Because, like you said earlier when you were talking about getting weapons for young QBs like David Carr, well, Teddy Bridgewater could use one. But I think with Mike Zimmer's head coach and the fact that to beat the teams in their division, the Green Bay Packers, the Detroit Lions, even the Bears, you have to be able to cover the wide receivers. It's kind of a weakness, and it's something that Zimmer needs to make his defense work. I think they're going to actually be the first ones to grab corner. And as the GM, I would take Trey Waynes, cornerback from Michigan State, another Big Ten prospect coming off the board.
Nice. 3 Big Ten guys in the top 11, and usually we see the top cornerback in the draft, which is a very needed position, especially in today's pass-heavy NFL, usually go in the top, 7 or 8 picks. This time slides to number 11, but still a good pickup for the Vikings. At number 12, we now have the Browns, and the fact that he's still on the board here, I think it's going to be a pretty easy pick for the Browns. There's 2 areas they really could address. At wide receiver, they're pretty weak. Their wide receiver core consists right now of Dwayne Bowe, Brian Hartline, and Andrew Hawkins, given that Josh Gordon has gotten himself suspended for another year. So not too many weapons at wide receiver, but it's a pretty good wide receiver class. And they have another first-round pick, number 19, that they got from the Bills for the Sammy Watkins trade last year. That one will be your pick, given that it's odd. We'll see if maybe you go wide receiver in that direction, because I'm not going to go that direction here. The Browns' biggest weakness on defense last year was against the run. They were one of the worst teams in the league stopping the run. Danny Shelton is sitting there on the board, defensive tackle out of Washington, and they're going to grab him.
Well, thanks for leaving me the prospects of improving the Cleveland offense. I really appreciate that with that 19th pick.
You're welcome.
Maybe I'll take Johnny Man's. No, they did that last year. Never mind. So I guess that brings us to number 13, the New Orleans Saints, which, interestingly enough for the Saints, a few weeks ago, just before free agency opened, you probably would have said, wow, they have a great offense and all their needs are on defense. Until they traded away Kenny Stills, that really weakened the offense, and somebody else, Jimmy Graham, I think it was, that they traded. But they did re-sign Mark Ingram, so their offense is apparently going to be much more running-based. So they could use a wide receiver. That probably wouldn't be their first need, though, because defense, it was bad last year. Their defense is bad. So I think they'd have to look and say, all right, who are the best edge rushers available? And I think the best one on the list at this point, and to put him on that carpet in the Superdome and let him go, he's an athletic freak. His name is Alvin Bud Dupree, defensive end outside linebacker from Kentucky. So that would be the Saints selection.
All right. Good pick. They could definitely use some defense. They'll be happy to get him on board. At number 14, we have the Miami Dolphins. Now, the Dolphins have made some additions to their offense this offseason. Like you mentioned, they got Kenny Stills from the Vikings. They signed Jordan Cameron. But they could still use another wide receiver. They let Brian Hartline go. Brandon Gibson is gone. So they have Jarvis Landry, good possession receiver. I think he averages about 2 yards per catch now. I think he had like 80-something receptions for about 200 yards. A little more than that, but you get the point. But he's a good possession receiver. They got Kenny Stills. They got a speed guy. They need a big wide receiver. And they have a good young QB in Tannehill. And just imagine their offense could be pretty good next year, especially with a guy that I'm about to add to their team right now. They'll have Jordan Cameron. They'll have Kenny Stills. They have Jarvis Landry. They have Lamar Miller, who averaged about 5 yards a carry last year. And now they get the big receiver. They're going to get Devontae Parker, wide receiver out of Louisville.
Yeah, I think all Dolphins fans would be ecstatic with that. There's some rumors going around now that the Dolphins might actually be looking at Todd Gurley, and no one's excited by that in Miami because he could miss part of this season. Half this season maybe would be a redshirt season, and it's not probably the biggest area of need, like you said. So, good choice for them getting the final piece to the offensive puzzle with a wide receiver. That brings us to 15, which unfortunately you should have been selecting since it's the San Francisco 49ers and you're so attuned with them.
Yeah.
Going into this offseason, I would have said clearly they're going to need probably wide receiver because Crabtree was leaving and their offense wasn't dynamic anyway. But it turns out what they really need is defense because most of their linebackers retired, as I noted, and all of their quarterbacks left. So they pretty much signed some retreads later on, but their defense, which was the strength of the team, and they have a defensive-minded coach in Tom Sula, needs to be rebuilt. I think what they really should draft here is Jim Harbaugh to be their head coach, but they've already screwed that up. So instead, I'm going to give them the next best cornerback on the market, and that'd be Jalen Collins from LSU.
All right. I think the 49 fans would be fairly happy with that. They definitely need some help in the backfield. So they'll be happy to add him to their team. At 16, the halfway point here of the draft, we have the Houston Texans. Now, the Texans are in a bit of a dilemma as some of their needs only match up to the board right now. They could use a QB. They have Tom Savage, Brian Hoyer, Ryan Mallett, none of which inspire a lot of confidence, but there's no one really here they can select at this point in the draft. They'll probably pick up someone maybe later or maybe wait till next year and see if O'Brien can work his magic with that blue platter of QBs. They could use a wide receiver. Andre Johnson was cut from the team given his high cap hit. Then Johnny Hopkins, great young talent. They signed Cecil Shorts from the Jaguars. He's okay, but they could really use someone to put opposite of Hopkins so that Hopkins doesn't get double teamed all the time. But the top 3 wide receivers are off the board at this point. They could potentially look at a Jalen Strong or maybe even a Joel Green pickup, but I don't think they're really, it's a deep wide receiver class. They can still get someone in round 2. So the next thing they can look at is the defense and need some linebackers. But all the top outside linebackers are off the board. Inside linebackers get selected in the top half of the first round. So they're kind of in a little bit of a weird position here. I think this is a spot where if they can trade down, they'll probably try to. But at this point, maybe a little bit of a wild card pick here. I'm going to give the Houston Texans Eli Harold, outside linebacker out of Virginia.
So you think they go with the reach over with the best player available? Because if it's a need.
If they go best player available, then they could look at other areas. But just looking at the needs that they have and the players that are available right now, it doesn't, like I said, it doesn't drive up too well.
Yeah, no, that's an interesting thing, and that does happen during the real draft. As you noted, there are a couple positions there they're really needing, but after 3 receivers and 3 or 4 edge rushers go off the board, they're kind of in a position where it's not great. But your selection of an edge rusher prior to the San Diego Chargers drafting, it doesn't hurt them because, and I am in San Diego, so I know these things. What they really need more than anything is either to protect Phillip Rivers or to get help on the D-line, and especially the interior of the D-line. They run a 3-4 out here, so any defensive end or defensive nose tackle types, they can eat up some space, and free up linebackers would be good. And most of the talk has been around the Chargers going to the defensive side in round 1. Although there was some talk of running back, there's also talk that in this draft, running back is deep enough that in round 2, a team like the Chargers is going to have a choice of some pretty good options when it comes to a running back. Tevin Coleman from Indiana is one that's been listed as a target for the Chargers in round 2. So with the 17th selection, the San Diego Chargers will take Malcolm Brown, defensive tackle, Texas.
Good pick for them, and they only are second defensive tackle off the board at this point in the draft. You mentioned running backs for the Chargers. I own Brandon Oliver in one of my dynasty leagues, so if you could try to convince them that they're set at running back and don't need to add anybody, I would much appreciate that.
I'll do my best.
And all right, at number 18, we are on to the Kansas City Chiefs. Now, they did sign Jeremy Maclin as a free agent, but they also did lose Dwayne Bowe, who probably was a good choice to let him go. He's getting up there in age and didn't really do a whole lot last year.
Wait, what about all those touchdowns he caught last year?
Yes, I think he led the team. I think he led the wide receivers in touchdowns for the Chiefs.
No, he tied for the lead with the wide receivers at 0.
He tied for the lead and tied for the worst. Weird thing for the Chiefs. So, but behind Maclin, all they really have is Jason Avant and Junior Hemingway. They don't really have anything. So if they want to give Alex Smith a chance, I think they could take wide receiver here. And, Rashad Perriman is someone that, as of a month and a half ago, wasn't even being possibly listed in the first round. He has flown up the draft boards. Now you see a lot of mocks where he's even in the, I even saw one mock where he went in the top 10. So there's a chance that he goes here, but for some reason, I'm going to give the Chiefs Jalen Strong, wide receiver out of Arizona State. I think it'd be a better match for the team than Perriman.
So are you saying that both literally and figuratively that Perriman is flying up the draft board?
He is. So yes, exactly. With his 4.2s, which was hand time. So let's really say it was a 4.3 that he ran at his pro day workout. But yeah, he is. We will probably see him in the first round now.
All right. Well, unfortunately for me now at 19, you left me the unenviable task of trying to improve the Cleveland Browns, and then you take a wide receiver before I can draft a wide receiver for the Cleveland Browns. Now, I would say there is a first-round talent at wide receiver staring the Browns in the face. He may have a few, shall we say, baggage issues, and I'm thinking that may scare the Browns off more than many other teams. And, of course, I'm speaking of Dorial Green Beckham, who might already have off-the-field issues that could cost him games. I don't think Cleveland, with the Josh Gordon situation so fresh in their mind, would go that route. I think they're in a horrible spot here where they don't have a wide receiver worth taking. I'm not in the Perriman camp, so I don't believe that they would grab a guy that wasn't even maybe even a second round pick, and all of a sudden he's talked about as a top half of the first round because of his speed. He had a lot of drops. So I think they'll do another tack to improve the offense, and that's go offensive line to protect whomever is going to start at quarterback. Try and open up more running lanes. Try and protect the quarterback better and get a wide receiver in round 2. So I think they'll take Eric Flowers, offensive tackle, Miami.
All right, and just our second offensive lineman off the board at pick 19. So usually you see more than that at this point, including a couple years ago we had 2 or 3 in the top 5 or 6 picks.
Yeah, normally it's defensive tackle and offensive line that seem to be the easy picks that people make because they seem safe, but not this year.
Yeah. All right, so now at number 20, the Philadelphia Eagles. Wide receiver also is actually one of their needs. I mentioned Jeremy Maclin with my last pick for the Chiefs. They lost him. So they have Jordan Matthews, who had a really good rookie season, but beyond that, it's Josh Huff and Riley Cooper. So they're definitely going to have to replace Maclin at some point. Now, I don't know if they'll do that in the first round or wait until maybe the second or third. It's a pretty deep wide receiver class. They can still get going like Philip Dorsett, Devin Smith, maybe even Nelson Aguilar with their second-round pick. So for their first-round pick, I'm going to say that they wait on wide receiver until the second round. And unfortunately, this is a guy that I was hoping would fall to the Colts at 29 because they could definitely use him. And as a Colts fan, I would like to see them get him. But for purposes of this, I'm going to give the Eagles safety Landon Collins out of Alabama.
It's not a bad pick because their secondary was bad. Although I would say Eric Armstead could be a selection. I'm not saying that Chip Kelly has an affinity for the Ducks players that he knows, but he has an affinity for the Ducks players that he knows.
Yeah, no, that's quite possible for them. That's a good point.
Yeah, or trading him for Marcus Mariota. Anything like that. Just crazy little things. All right, so that brings us to the end of the top 20. So to recap, 11 to 20, we had Waynes, Shelton, Dupree, Parker, Collins, Harold, Brown, Strong, Flowers, and Collins. And like you, I would have hoped that Collins might slip to the Colts, but I don't think he will, so that's a good selection. Brings us to 21, though, and that gets us the Cincinnati Bengals. The Bengals are always an interesting case because they're a playoff team, but you never feel like they're really a contender. Unfortunately, I feel like it's the quarterback that keeps them from being a contender. They're not taking one here, obviously. I guess that means they're going to try and strengthen some area of the team. They could maybe try and strengthen the offensive line. There are a couple tackles out there that wouldn't be bad selections at this point. They could maybe go for defensive line. I mean, as I mentioned, Eric Armstead, this is about the right range for him. They could go with cornerback because, plugging in an extra corner in this pass-happy NFL now, maybe that helps them get past somebody. Honestly, I think they'll be boring. I think they'll look at what's available. There aren't any truly exciting names, and I think they'll take Andrus Peat, offensive tackle from Stanford, knowing that both of their tackles, Andrew Whitworth and Andre Smith, are entering the final year of their contracts. This gives them their future replacement. They can slide one of those guys into guard this year. They got a pretty solid offensive line. They keep running. Maybe that gets them a little further than they got this year.
That is a good pick for them. That is also another player that I was hoping would possibly slide to the Colts. I think Pete has potential to be a starting left tackle in the league for the next dozen years. So good pickup for the Bengals. And, like I said, another player that was hoping would slide to the Colts, but at least in this scenario, he is not. At number 22, we have the Pittsburgh Steelers on the clock. Now, I can't say with 95% certainty they will be taking a defensive player here. They're actually set on the offensive line. They're pretty good there. They'll, they may just leave in the draft just as to get some backups, but certainly not in the first round. Their offense looked really good last year. They were one of the more high-scoring teams with Roethlisberger, Le'Veon Bell at running back. They've got good wide receivers, Antonio Brown, Martavis Bryant, Marcus Wheaton. They could, maybe use a third wide receiver. They'll probably just that later in the draft. But with this first-round pick, they are going defense now. They could use help at various levels of the defense. They could take a linebacker. They could use help in the backfield, safety, or cornerback. As we all know, Hall of Famer Palomaro just retired recently, so they could maybe be looking at safety. But Landon Collins just went off the board a couple picks ago. I think they're going to go cornerback, and I'm going to give them a good in-demand coverage cornerback they could certainly use. I'm going to give them Kevin Johnson, cornerback out of Wake Forest.
Interestingly enough, I also thought that's who they would take there. So clearly you and I think alike, and I think, as you mentioned, if they don't take defense, I would be shocked. Although, maybe they would take running back because there is the possibility that Bell will miss some games. And you saw what happened when Bell was injured last year. They couldn't even beat Baltimore at home in the playoffs. So maybe they'll be the first team to break that running back jinx in the first round, but I'm mostly kidding there.
Yeah, I would certainly hope so.
So that brings us to 23, another team that made the playoffs, obviously, the Detroit Lions. You may have heard, but Detroit lost Ndamukong Suh. They also lost Nick Fairley. They did make a trade for Haloti Ngata, so they replaced half of that. So defensive line, clearly an area they might need to replace some. I feel like they've needed corner and safety help for as long as I can remember. And really on the offensive side, running back isn't that solid. They lost Reggie Bush. They have Joique Bell. They have Riddick. Maybe they feel like they're set. I'm not going to take a running back here because I don't think that'd be my biggest area of need. But it is something to look out for because at some point, some team here is going to feel like they're just getting too good of a value and they're going to pull the trigger on getting the running back. But I think instead they're going to say we need to get a big honking man to put in the middle of our defense again, just like we had before. And they're going to go with Eddie Goldman, defensive tackle from Florida State.
Good pick for them. And Ngata, they got, as you mentioned, just has 1 year left on his contract, so he may not be there next year. But Goldman gets a year to play with him and learn from him, and be a solid lineman for them going forward. And number 24, we have the Arizona Cardinals. They have a few different needs. They could use someone on defense, certainly, but they already have one of the better defenses in the league. They might look at pass rushers. They might look at someone along the defensive line. But I'm going to actually give them a running back. I'm going to break the seal of the running backs in this draft. There's none off the board yet. They have Andre Ellington, who 2 years ago as a rookie looked really good. Last year, not so much. Had a lot of injury issues, but even when he was on the field, didn't look that great. He's more of a lightning type guy. I think they need thunder. And they're going to get that thunder in the form of Todd Gurley, running back, Georgia.
Not surprisingly, I had that as well as what I would do if I were in Arizona's shoes. Like you said, they have Ellington. He can start the season for them before he gets hurt, and then Gurley will be back when he gets hurt, so it's perfect.
Exactly.
And you do need 2 running backs in this day and age, it seems. So, good pick for the Cardinals. The Carolina Panthers are on the clock next. Clearly, they won their division with their great, stellar season that they had, where they did not break 8 wins to win the what? No, that can't be right. I must be misreading this. But they clearly have some areas of improvement. Their defense took a step back without Greg Hardy, so edge rusher maybe is an area that they could look at, but we've already seen a lot of edge rushers go. Their secondary was okay. They could always look there. But I think it's the other side of the ball that they're really going to address. The offensive line could use a little help because Cam Newton gets hit a lot. Part of it's his own doing, but really their offensive line has been shaky. So I think they're going to add La'el Collins, offensive lineman from LSU, and hope that he can maybe open up some holes in the running game and protect Cam Newton a little better. And he's from the SEC, so he and Cam might already know each other, even though that was like a long time ago.
I think that's a good pick for the Panthers. And the funny thing is, I was looking at my draft board, and I was just going to mention that we've already had 2 Collins off the board. Landon Collins has already been picked, and Jalen Collins has already been picked. So I was going to mention that I was going to take La'el Collins for somebody before this first round, just so we could get all 3 Collins into the first round. But you did that for me. So
You're welcome.
good pick for the Panthers. Now we're at number 26 for the Ravens, and I got to say at this point, I think that Ozzie Newsome is going to rush up and make the pick himself, turn in the card to commissioner and say, "Here's my pick," because they need wide receiver. Troy Smith is gone. Steve Smith did okay, for a 35-year-old. Old man has been in the league for what seems like 20 years, but his first half was much better than the second half, so you can say that he might be slowing down. Dennis Pitta may not even be back next year. Joe Flacco needs someone to throw to. Torrey Smith is a speed guy who's gone, and the other speed guy who we mentioned earlier is still on the board. So, and he's a guy that, was, people thought might already be off the board by now. The fact that he's still there, I think Newsom rushes up there and takes Rashad Perriman, wide receiver, Central Florida.
Well, I'll disagree on two things there. First, I don't believe Ozzie Newsome will be at the draft in Chicago, so he probably won't rush up himself. He's probably in the war room back in Baltimore, so let's be clear there. Second, I have it on good sources that tell me that Perriman is on their short list, so wait, that agrees with you. Never mind. Make it one item. So 27.
And I just noticed.
Oh, go ahead.
I've taken all 5 wide receivers, by the way. We've had Amari Cooper, Kevin White, Rashad Perriman, Devontae Parker, and Jalen Strong off the board, and it just so happens they've all gone to even teams at this point.
And I noted you haven't taken any of the offensive linemen or the defensive tackles, really. You took a nose tackle, so that was good of you. Clearly, you're a flash guy, and I'm a build from the trenches guy, apparently. Yeah. Andy Reid would be proud of me. You're welcome, Andy. Friend of the podcast.
He would be.
Well, with that, now, I get to be number 27. I get to go to Jerry's world, so now I can get crazy, right? I'm going to sit in front of my 108-yard high-def monitor in the Texas Stadium, Dallas, whatever they call it now, Jerry's World. I believe they're having a draft party there as well, so you could watch the draft on those high-def TVs. That might be pretty cool, to be honest, even though I'm not a Cowboy fan. But the Cowboys, secondary's a need. There are a couple good corners out there. I think that could be an interesting avenue for them to pursue. Offensive line is good. They don't need to go down there. Defensive line, not so much. But they did lose a guy named DeMarco Murray in the offseason. Now, they did replace him with, they replaced him for 2 games with Run DMC. I am giving him 2 games before he gets hurt. That may or may not be fair to Darren McFadden, but it may be 1. So I think at this point...
Is that 2 days in the regular season, or is that 2 days into preseason? Or in the training camp, I just want to clarify.
I'm saying games against other people, so I'm assuming they're going to hold him out of the preseason to be smart, because you don't want to waste his games there. But because you know that Run DMC is not your future, and you weren't willing to pay for DeMarco Murray to stay for $5 million, why not just get a replacement like, I don't know, Melvin Gordon on a rookie contract and have him locked up for the next 4 to 5 years? So I'm going to give him Melvin Gordon, running back, Wisconsin.
Wow, look at that. Jeff actually taking a running back in the first round.
Wait, listen. Tss, that's me going sizzle. Yeah. I'm all about the flash.
And I will say, from a fantasy standpoint, Melvin Gordon is, of course, going to be one of the top selected rookie running backs in fantasy leagues this year. But if he goes to a bad situation, like if he goes to the Patriots, where fantasy running backs go to die, or if he just goes to some mediocre situation, say he falls to the Jaguars in the top of round 2, then he may go in, let's say round 11 or something of redraft leagues. But in your situation, where he goes to the Cowboys and is running behind that line, he just went from like an 11th round fantasy pick to like a 4th or 5th round fantasy pick.
Yeah, I have to believe that's about the best situation either Gurley or Gordon could find themselves in from a fantasy perspective is to fall to Dallas, and Dallas grabs them. Because, like you said, that offensive line, you're plugging in. Now, a lot of it was DeMarco Murray. I'm not shortchanging him, but some of it is the offensive line. So if you're going to be a rookie, man, it'd be great to run behind that offensive line. I mean, any of these teams coming up after them, as you mentioned, Denver, the Colts, Green Bay, New Orleans, New England, none of those are actually great for a running back. So I mean, if you get to Dallas, that's fantasy gold for a rookie running back.
Yeah, absolutely. And then at number 28, we have the Denver Broncos. They could go a few different ways with this pick. I've seen some people list tight end as a need for them. They may take one at some point in the draft, but they signed Owen Daniels, who I think has played pretty much his entire career with Gary Kubiak. I think actually all of his career. He was there with the Texans, and he was there with the Ravens, and now he's with Gary Kubiak. With the Broncos, and in addition to Daniels, they also have Virgil Green. Of course, they lost Julius Thomas, but I've seen some people say that they might take Max Williams with this pick. I think there's more than one X in his name, which is why
I think you missed an X there.
I might have shortchanged one of the X's, but I don't think they would do that. I think they know that they're in win now mode. Peyton Manning's going to be 39 this season. Rookie tight ends tend to pretty much not do anything. It's a rare exception that they do. Gronk was one of those exceptions, but look at Eric Ebron last year. He was the number 10 overall pick and made hardly any noise at all.
Who?
In Detroit. Exactly.
Oh, that's right, Eric Ebron.
I don't think they're going tight end here in the first round, but I do think they need to protect their said 39-year-old QB, and it just so happens that DJ Humphries is still sitting there. He'll fit well in Kubiak's zone blocking scheme, and he's good in pass protection. So I'm going to give the Broncos DJ Humphries, offensive tackle out of Florida.
A very nice pick, and I agree. I think protecting Manning's important, and I don't think the tight end, even though Williams did fine at the combine. Early on, he was projected late in the first round. Now he's slid, so he's mid to late second round. I think that's more likely for a tight end that isn't a world beater. So that brings us to number 29. Who is that? Who drafts 29th? Oh, it's the Indianapolis Colts, Mark. So they're going to take running back. Oh, no, Todd Gurley went. No, instead they're going to take Melvin Gordon went.
You took Gordon to the Cowboys just on purpose so that he couldn't be there for the Colts.
I have to agree with you. But no, I clearly think the Cowboys will go that direction. And even if they didn't, I believe that if, and this is me drafting for the Colts, I wouldn't take a running back here. I think it's not the offense that kept you from winning in the playoffs. And sure, you could say, well, if they had a better running game, their defense would be better. No, it doesn't matter. You have Andrew Luck. You keep the ball in your best player's hand. Andrew Luck, the wide receivers, they've even added to the wide receiver core. They have Frank Gore for this year. The way they structured the contracts, you talked about Denver being in win-now modes, but the Colts are almost in a win-now mode. They have a window here before they have to pay Luck $1 gazillion so they can sign a bunch of veterans like Andre Johnson and Frank Gore to 2-year deals effectively that get them a window here to win the Super Bowl. So adding a rookie running back doesn't help that. Getting better at stopping the run might help that. With that being said, a lot of the defensive tackles that, like a Malcolm Brown might have fit here, but he's gone. But there's one player we mentioned earlier, a defensive lineman from Oregon who actually fits into the 3-4 scheme. His name is Eric Armstead. And I believe that if he does fall to number 29, the Colts will be very satisfied with adding a good quality 3-4 defensive end. They can help them against the run, can help free up some of the linebacking space. So I'll go with Eric Armstead, defensive end, Oregon.
And I got you, that's pretty good value there because he's a guy that, hugely rises in that draft board. Someone that, recently I've seen in the top half of the first round in some mocks. So I think if he's sitting there at 29, that's pretty good value for the Colts. And like you said, they do need pass rush. So I guess I can live with that, and we can get the running back in round 2.
Correct.
At number 30, we have the Green Bay Packers. Now, the Packers have a luxury because they have one of the deepest and most talented rosters in football, so they could choose to pretty much go the best available player route. They're another team that could potentially look at tight end, but again, I don't think they'll use that for round 1. I think they're going to look at their defensive backfield. They lost Devon House, they lost Tremont Williams. Casey Hayward is in the final year of his rookie deal, so I think they're going to look for a cornerback. And given that Waynes, Johnson, and Collins are already off the board, I think they will go with Marcus Peters, cornerback out of Washington. another guy who's good value as long as they can, keep any off-field issues away. Just kicked off Washington last year. If not for that, he probably would have gone much higher. He would probably already be off the board at this point. So the Packers will hope that their culture will keep him in line, and then they get their cornerback for the future.
Yeah, I will say I considered taking him at Dallas because, as we all know, Jerry Jones doesn't have a problem taking character risks. So, and they do need a corner, so that would be a perfect fit. I mean, who gets in trouble in Dallas? Having lived there, I can say 90% of the people get in trouble living in Dallas. But no, I'm sure Peters would be great in Dallas. But Green Bay, as you said, if they can keep him clean, they get some good value, keep him out of trouble. That is a good value pick at number 30. Which brings us once again to the New Orleans Saints. And I get to pick for the Saints a second time in this draft. So my strategy paid off really well the first time around. They got a speed rusher with Bud Dupree. So that helped the defense. And the second time around, unfortunately, like the Packers in front of them, they were probably looking at defensive backfield. I still think they will go that route. I think they will say, listen, we need to improve our defense. We'll worry about our offense. We have picks in the next round. We can get a receiver. I think they go Byron Jones, cornerback, Connecticut.
That is quite unfortunate because that is already who I had queued up for the Patriots at the last pick of draft.
Take that, Bill Belichick. Yeah.
So, yeah, that is quite unfortunate. The Patriots, I think, will be looking at cornerback. They, of course, lost Darrell Revis. They lost Brandon Browner. And those guys are now off the board. So at this point, I think the next cornerback is not really worthy of a first-round pick. I think that, Patriots, as we've seen them do in the past, will probably try to trade down at this point. Trade down from 32 to 39 to mid-40s, something like that range. Pick up an extra future pick and accumulate picks the way that Belichick does and kind of rules the draft board. But in this mock draft, without the trading, I will say that with those cornerbacks now all gone, the Patriots might look to address defensive tackle because they have a hole there now with, I'm blanking on his name right at the moment.
Vince Wilfork. Yeah, they got rid of Vince.
Wilfork, yes. I can picture his face. I was just blanking on his name. Now that he's gone and is on the Houston Texans, I think they'll address that spot and they'll go with Jordan Phillips, defensive tackle out of Oklahoma.
That's not a bad choice. They do tend to take those big physical guys, fill the holes. Now, obviously, he'd have to be a guy they think can play the Patriot way, which for Wilfork is, stuffing the run and just being an immovable mountain, or another Patriot way is murdering people and being sentenced to life in prison. Either way, as long as he fits one of those, I think they could draft him.
Yes.
I kid because I care. All right, well, that brings us to the end of the draft. In a short amount of time, if the real draft goes that fast, I think the networks will actually be upset.
Yeah, they would. I mean, especially now it's in prime time, they're wanting that first round to last at least 3 hours.
So let me recap from 20 to 32. I didn't do a recap at 30, knowing we only had 2 more picks to go. We had Pete, Johnson, Goldman, Gurley breaking the running back curse from the last couple of years. We had Collins from LSU. We had Perriman, Gordon, another running back, 2 in the first round. Humphreys, Armstead, Peters, Jones, and Phillips. That means there actually, Mark, a couple of really good players that still are available. If you need offensive line help, there's TJ Clemmings from Pittsburgh. There's Cameron Irving from Florida State.
Jake Fisher from Oregon.
Jake Fisher from Oregon. No inside linebackers were taken. And you mentioned that earlier, but, there are Benardrick McKinney and Eric Kendricks. That's Mississippi State and UCLA. Both of them were thought of highly. Could go near the tail end of the first round. They didn't in our draft, but they could. And you mentioned the Patriots maybe trading out of that last spot. I guess conventional wisdom is you usually trade back in to get a quarterback. I'm not sure this year there's one that anybody really has their sights set on. Brett Hundley, maybe. maybe not. None of the quarterbacks jump out at me as somebody you'd trade back in for. But we did also mention the flight risk that is the wide receiver with first-round talent, but maybe third-round off-the-field issues, and that'd be Dorial Green-Beckham. Maybe somebody would be interested to jump back in there and get ahead of all the other teams and go for a DGB. What do you think about that?
Yeah, that could definitely happen. He's got immense talent, immense physical skills. And of course, he has the off-field issues that he had at Missouri and spent this last year, practicing with Oklahoma. But he's 6'5", very physical, ran a pretty good 40-yard dash for someone of that size. So definitely someone the teams will be looking at. Like you said, wide receivers are very deep. In addition to DGB still on the board, you've also got Nelson Aguilar, Philip Dorsett, Devin Smith, Devin Funchess. You mentioned QBs as far as if there's anyone that they might trade in the bottom last few picks of the first round. Like last year we saw Teddy Bridgewater, the Vikings trade back into the end of the first round. I don't know if there's anyone there, and I don't even know who the consensus number 3 is. Depending on who you listen to, it's either Brett Hundley or Garrett Grayson or Bryce Petty. So it just depends on which team is drafting and who they like best based on the film work that they've done and interviews they've had with those guys. But I don't know that I could pick a favorite right now as who's going to be the third QB off the board.
Well, according to Sean Mannion's agent, it's Sean Mannion.
I'm going to say it's probably not going to be him. I'm going to say it's one of those 3 that I mentioned.
And the other position that we obviously addressed getting hit a couple times in the first round with Gurley and Gordon going was running back. But it is a fairly deep 2-round running back draft, wouldn't you say? There's still some good names at running back, so teams like your Indianapolis Colts, for instance, who didn't get one in the first round, or the San Diego Chargers, there's still some guys out there that really could help those teams from a running standpoint. I mean, I'm partial to Tevin Coleman, having attended IU, but that's not the only. Jay Ajayi, I hate pronouncing that name, is also out there. I mean, there are a number. I mean, wouldn't you say there are a number of quality running backs that could go in the second round?
Yeah, and that's another one where I don't think I think Gurley and Gordon are the consensus top 2. I don't think there is a consensus. It's kind of another big group of guys. You mentioned Coleman and Ajayi. I also put out there Amir Abdullah, Duke Johnson, Jeremy Langford, David Johnson, David Cobb, T.J. Yeldon. Out of those 8 guys, I would say probably about 5 of them will go in the second round, and then maybe the other 3 go in the third round. So fairly deep running back draft, and we'll see how they end up being allocated on draft night. But I do think that we'll end the running back drought of 2 straight years with one not going in the first round. I think that ends this year.
And can I make a request for the second round? Is that allowed?
Sure.
So at pick 48 with the San Diego Chargers, is there any way that they could take an offensive guard from Duke?
Laken Tomlinson?
Tomlinson? LT?
Oh, I didn't even. Wow, it did not even register. Nice.
Thank you. I've been waiting all night to drop the second round knowledge, so I'm glad everyone stayed on to hear all these great second round nuggets we have, like an LT being drafted by the Chargers in round 2. I mean, can it get better than that?
It almost has to happen now. I mean, that's just a perfect fit.
I will be calling Tom Telesco after this. Don't worry.
Yes, make that happen, please.
And I guess we're amiss if we don't mention we did have 32 picks in the first round, but there were only 30 teams that we did draft for. There are 2 teams, as we noted by having multiple picks for the Browns and the Saints, that didn't draft in the first round. We would have the Buffalo Bills, whose first selection is actually number 50, and of course the Seattle Seahawks, whose first selection is 63. Any thoughts on where those 2 teams could be as a bonus mark?
Well, let's see. The Bills obviously need a QB because right now I think the plan is Matt Castle, and from everything that I'm reading in Buffalo, I think they've pretty much given up on E.J. Manuel. I think they've kind of realized that
they just drafted E.J. Manuel in the first round like 2 years ago. He's got to be the QB of the future.
You would think so, but I think they've, internally at least, I think they've realized that they effed up there, and that did not work out. And of course, if they had a first round pick this year, but even if, they traded David Watkins. Even if they had a first round, it would be the 19th pick, which again is in no man's land as far as this year. QBs, the top two guys are going to be off the board. They're not going to take a Petty or a Humley or a Grayson at number 19. So they're pretty much working to fill their QB spot this year anyway. Although I guess they could take one of those three guys in the second or third round, or get your boy Mannion out of Oregon State in the third round or something. But again, not really the spot where you're hoping to get your QB of the future. But of course, it can happen. We've seen QBs from far beyond the second and third round that end up being Super Bowl winners. So won't name any specific names. None happen to come to mind. Right?
Russell Wilson. Russell Wilson in the third round.
Third round. I was more thinking of some Michigan guy in the sixth round who he shall not be named right now.
I will only make a prediction that during the draft, not on the first day more than once, but definitely on the second and third days, a certain QB from New England's name will be dropped about 100 times as to why we need to keep watching, because you don't know when you're going to see the next great QB drafted in round 6. When in all actuality, we don't need to keep watching. We can just read round 6 details later and see if any of those. Heck, there may not be a QB drafted in round 6, so that makes it a moot point. But you think the Bills need a QB? I actually don't think they're going to go QB. I think they're looking at it, and like you, in round 2, they're going to be like, oh crap, there aren't any QBs there that we love. I can wait till round 3. Let's try and at least improve our team for this upcoming season, and then maybe next year.
Offensive line.
I was thinking offensive line.
Yep. They already have a really good defense. They have one of the better defenses in the NFL. Plus, they have Rich Ryan. They can take some okay players and push them up into being a better defense. And they have some parts on offense. We mentioned the hole at QB, but they have some receivers. They find Percy Harvin. They have Sammy Watkins. They got Charles Clay at tight end from the Dolphins. They have LaShawn McCoy at running back. But if they could get an offensive lineman with that second-round pick to help protect whoever is throwing passes for them and to open up some holes for LaShawn McCoy, I think that's where they'd have to look.
Yep. And then the Seahawks picking at the tail end of the second round. Any thoughts on where Seattle could be leaning?
I think they could go just about anywhere. I think it's another situation similar to Green Bay. They have a really talented roster. They can maybe look at best player available at that point. But thinking back to the Super Bowl, they were very banged up. Sherman was injured. Thomas was injured. They had another guy who broke a leg or wrist or something.
I think it was a forearm. It was Lane who broke his forearm or just look at his elbow or something, or wrist.
Yeah, so I think they would either look at maybe defensive backfield just to add some depth to one of their team strengths, or they could look potentially at wide receiver. The top wide receiver in the Super Bowl was a undrafted guy that was working at Foot Locker like the week before or something like that. So you could use some depth there, especially with Paul Richardson, hurting his ACL in the playoffs and probably missing most or all of his coming year.
Yeah, wide receiver wouldn't be a bad choice, although they did add a pass catcher that can also help in the red zone named Graham. You may have heard about it. There was a trade, I think.
Timmy Graham? Is that?
Timmy. No, it's not Timmy. Yeah. It's not Timmy. It's Jimmy. Good Timmy. I wish his name was Timmy Graham. He'd be my favorite player. I would never stop yelling Timmy when he scored. And when you draft him in the first round of your fantasy draft or second round, you would yell, I think I'll take Timmy.
South Park reference for those of you that aren't getting it.
Yeah, I think you're right, though. I think they'll probably most likely go defensive backfield. Guys like Ronald Darby might be sitting there. There could be a safety or P.J. Williams from Florida State. A lot of Florida State guys apparently in the backfield. Or they could go, with Pete Carroll, you never know. They could go offensive line, just try and protect Russell Wilson, open up more holes for Marshawn Lynch for another year.
They did trade Max Unger, so maybe they'll look at the top of the level center and see if it's someone they like.
True, good point there. All right. Well, that gets us through all 32 teams then. I didn't want to leave out the Seahawks and I didn't want to leave out the Bill fans, just because I know from just a few years ago the Colts didn't have a first round pick, and I knew how painful it was actually to watch the first round of the draft and know that you're not going to pick. So
It,
at
it's
least
still exciting, and I still watch, but it does definitely damper it a little bit. It's not quite as fun.
Yeah, definitely. I would say I watch and it's exciting as you mentioned, but for reasons of like trying to fit the puzzle together, as opposed to this year, knowing the Colts are picking 29th, you'll be definitely more interested as you get to like pick 20 and you note, ooh, Todd Gurley's still on the board. Ooh, Gordon's still available. Ooh, yeah, whomever you really want your team to pick. And as those picks count down, you get really excited. Then it gets on the clock and you're like, yes, Melvin Gordon's there. We're going to draft Melvin Gordon. And then they bring up a card and they say, with the 29th selection, the Indianapolis Colts take Phillips, nose tackle, Oklahoma. And you say, what? Come on, that's half the fun of the draft, right?
And it always happens with the Colts. Like, somehow Wayne and Collins, the best safety in the draft this year, is going to be there at 29 somehow, some way, and yet they're not going to take them.
No, they'll take Laken Tomlinson, and I'll be so angry. Double anger right there. No, but that's the fun of the draft, everybody. You get to watch, root for your team to fill a hole, and there's just untold promise. And heck, half these guys aren't even going to be any good. They're going to go in situations that don't work for them. They don't have the heart or the drive once they get the paycheck. There are many reasons. There'll be injuries. Half these names we mentioned in the 32, they're just going to be guys. A few of them will probably be really good. Maybe one or two might be Hall of Fame caliber. That's actually a really high percentage to get a couple Hall of Famers out of a draft class, a first round. So, yeah, it's interesting. It does give you a lot of hope, though, for your team to fill some holes and to really close the gap if you're not winning, or if you're already on top, to hopefully increase your lead in your division. So, always fun to watch the draft, see where everybody ends up, and in our case, to predict where things may shake out. So we'll post this. We'll keep this list, obviously, and let everyone make fun of us after the draft when none of these picks, outside of hopefully the top one or two, come true.
I think we'll get more than two.
I agree. I'm hoping we'll at least hit. What are the draft next? Have you ever followed that, Mark? I think it's a third is actually a pretty good draft.
But how do we grade ourselves? If we've got the slot right, a different team do a trade, does that count as a hit? Or what if we said a certain player to a certain team at slot 14 or whatever, but they trade around and get that player at slot 17? Does that still count as a hit?
I don't think so. I think the way, and we'll have to check how some of the other people grade themselves on how their mocks performed, but I would imagine it's slot and team, which, again, when you're not predicting trades, really hurts you because we know, what did you say, the over-under's 5.5 trades? We know there'll be trades, but in this case, we're not going to say that, so we've guaranteed ourselves at least 5 or 6 wrong picks just by not having trades.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right, but it'll be fun. So remember, everybody, the draft is coming up. It's just a week and a few days away. It's next Thursday, live from Chicago. The first time it's been outside of New York in a long time. Now, Mark, just before we close, do you happen to know how many different cities have hosted the draft?
I did actually see this. I was reading some magazine that listed, I want to say 5 or 6, somewhere around there.
Close. It was 7. And strangely enough, if I told you to name the 7, of course everybody would get New York. People would guess Chicago. L.A. actually.
New York, Chicago, and Philly.
Yes, New York, Chicago, and Philly are the dominant 3. New York, far and away, the dominant 1. And then Philly, then Chicago. Pittsburgh hosted twice in the 40s. Los Angeles hosted once in the 50s. D.C. hosted once in 41. And for some unknown reason, Milwaukee hosted in 1940. I assume it's because of Green Bay and Chicago were the dominant franchises, and it was close to them, and maybe St. Louis. And back in the 1940, maybe there weren't as many franchises, and it was, but Milwaukee instead of Chicago, really?
Well, have you heard what city is actively bidding and pursuing to be the 8th different city to host the draft?
I would hope it's Dallas, Texas.
Canton, Ohio.
I go with no on that. I think you have to have a franchise. It's like the Super Bowl. You can't just, I mean, seriously, we're not just going to drop the draft into Omaha. Hey, it's a really fun town. It's got a lot of convention space. Orlando should be hosting. Well, it's a great town to visit. Well, yeah, but it doesn't have anything to do with the NFL. Now, I know, Canton, there is something to do with the NFL. I'd say no. I'm going to go with no on that. I'm going to say that especially the 2017 draft will be in Los Angeles for the new franchises or franchise in Los Angeles. 2016, I'm up in the air. It could go a number of places. I think Dallas will bid. I think Indy will bid, but I don't think Indy's ever going to win. Maybe St. Louis if they get a deal done on their stadium, something like that with stadiums and all this hullabaloo going around. I could easily see one of those cities. You know, St. Louis probably isn't getting a Super Bowl, but they might get the draft coming there really soon.
I hope they do move it around, though. I was tired of seeing it in New York every single year. I know back in 1994, I think it was, they were moving the NBA draft around a little bit. I think now it's back to being in New York all the time. But it was in Indianapolis at the time, and I went. And it was decently fun, something to do. I wouldn't go every year, but it was kind of a bucket list item to attend the draft. And it was the Glenn Robinson draft, so, you know, local guy, not local to Indy, but Indiana guy, went to Purdue, being the number one pick in the draft. So it was fun. And at the end of the second round, everyone was cheering for the Pacers to select Damon Bailey that year, and it did not. But it's fun to attend once.
Well, I think that was part of the NFL's strategy of moving it around from New York because, in all honesty, maybe once every 5 or 6 years throw it back to New York, but the New York market, they've got them. They don't need to worry about New York. They're diehard football fans. You know, like you said, it's a bucket list item for some people, or it at least draws a few casual fans in because it's an event. And they don't just do the draft anymore. They do Draft City and the NFL Experience and all sorts of things leading up to it. It takes over the town for a few days, so yeah, that's good publicity for them in a town. Maybe Green Bay next year. What do you think?
Sure, why not?
Maybe.
I'm fine with,
Maybe
giving
not.
it to every city at some point.
Including Canton?
I wouldn't be as opposed to Canton as you are, but I think that the actual NFL cities should get priority first. But I know they're trying to bring awareness. I think they're renovating the Hall of Fame. I know they're renovating the stadium there that they use for the Hall of Fame game. So if there's some particular reason that they want to, bring awareness to that, then so be it. But in general, I think Dallas obviously would be a good host. The stadium there, and just bring it to a lot of the other different NFL cities and see how excited those fans can get for it.
I think they should bring it to San Diego because after next year there might not be a Chargers franchise in San Diego, so that way they could add take another city off the list, and then the following year they can go to LA. Once they're in LA, they can just add to the number of cities they visit. What do you think?
Yeah, no, I think it'll be tough one at some point. Of course, living here near San Francisco, I wouldn't mind saying they wouldn't have to. When you have situations like this, where two teams close together, they wouldn't have to come out here to do it once in Oakland and once in San Francisco. Just do kind of a joint event, or those two teams are the co-hosts, something like that. So
where do you think they would host in the Bay Area? Because I'd imagine they're doing it in an auditorium in Chicago, a theater, just like they've been doing it in a theater in New York. Oakland, I'm guessing, is not full of theater and quality venues for the NFL. Would that be fair to say?
I'm thinking they wouldn't do it in Oakland just because they wouldn't want people to die.
Well, there's that. Or they wouldn't want them to drive by the O.Co. Coliseum and smell the sewage as it dripped out onto the playing surface. So you're thinking maybe like the Fillmore over in San Francisco or something crazy like that.
Oh, yeah, there's definitely some venues that you could do.
And there's history. I mean, Chicago's been touting, Sinatra played at the venue that they're hosting the draft in. So clearly San Francisco could throw some things up there that would match or at least be in that league of great events that have happened in this auditorium previously. I don't know that Dallas can't do that as well, but I'm sure they can find something. Jerry will build something if he has to, I'm sure, to host the draft.
No doubt.
Good job, Jerry. All right, well, anything else, Mark, about the draft you want to add before we sign off tonight on this live mock draft podcast?
No, I don't think so. I think we covered pretty much everything. It's just exciting time to watch and see what your favorite team does and see where some of your favorite college players end up.
That's right. And for those of you that also like names, remember this could be the year of 3 Collins in the first round. Very exciting for you Collinses out there. Or for those of you that prefer, hanging with Mr. Cooper, you could hear his name called early as well.
Indeed.
All right. Well, with that, Mark, I'm going to let you sign off from wherever you may be tonight.
Signing off from Santa Clara, Mark Upland.
All right, then signing out from San Diego, Jeff Miller. And we'll talk to you soon, sports fans, with our next podcast coming up after the schedule release. We'll probably do something which is post-draft and after schedule release, and then we'll do something again probably after the over-under official lines come out in Vegas. So keep checking the webpage.
A full podcast dedicated to over-unders.
That's right. And again, if you'd followed us all season and you had gone in like we did against the Carolina Panthers last year, you would have both won your under win bet, and you would have won it by choosing a division champion, which is probably the only time in history you could ever do that. So it's really a win-win. So keep checking the website. Remember us, steelscorpionsports.com, a better species of fantasy football. Go out to the blogs page. You'll read all about the draft. We have some other interesting blog posts coming up that we really want you to take advantage of. Also, read about the rules and then reserve a spot in one of our leagues for this upcoming season. All right, so sports fans, we'll talk to you later.